So in this video, we are looking at a text-to-speech app using the OpenAI API. Obviously, we're all building AI apps these days, so this is a great example of what you can do with it. So this template is available on rapidmvp.co, so you can go and take a look at that. So I'm just going to run through how it functions, and then we'll look at the background and show you how it works and how to put it together. So basically, this is the homepage when you're logged in. So we've got Superbase Auth. I'm not going to go through that. There's plenty of videos on the channel for that. We have got login with Google via the Google Cloud. Again, there's videos for that. I'll link all these in the comments down below. And then also within the Superbase Auth, we have got the email confirmation. So your user has to confirm email address before they can sign in. That's also part of this. So again, linked in the comments down below. So that with being said, let's have a look at how this works. So essentially what we've got our app, and essentially we want to take some text, turn it into an MP3 file. So first off, we've got where we input the text, and then we've got some different voices. These are the standard voices for OpenAI, what they provide. Obviously you can change the names, which is what I would do, obviously, to something a bit more user friendly. But then we're through the player.
Your artificial intelligence text-to-speech partner.
We can just test.
Welcome to Speakio, your artificial intelligence text-to-speech partner.
Sample each of the voices. So that's on the main page, and then you just type in the text you want to change. Now, as you can see, we are currently limited to 1,000 characters, but obviously you can do that as many as you want, or as few as you want. Then we go to audio. It's making the API call. Then we get our download icon. This saves to the cloud. So the cloud in our case being Superbase backend. In the desktop version, because it's sort of set up for both, what will happen is you get the cloud icon and a download icon. And the download icon essentially just downloads it direct to your downloads folder. And likewise, the cloud icon also does it purely to Superbase. So it's stored in the cloud. So we give that a name. Call it Hello World. And then you see we return our screen back to how it was, and our file has been saved to the cloud. So if we go to our user gallery and we scroll down, there you go, our new file is there. So on the users gallery, it's slightly different between the mobile and the desktop, just in the way we've set it up. And on the template itself, we've actually got two branches, one for mobile, one for desktop, because it was the easiest way to control the differences. That's how I've done it in this instance. So in the gallery, we can select a file and play it in the audio player at the top. So you can see, just click the play button, we get it. And then we can delete a file and also share a file. And that's the difference between the web version and the mobile version. This is running on an Android device, as you can see on the screen. And then the web version, if you go to the users gallery, see our Hello World's there. We've got the option to download again. So basically the difference is you share them on the Android version and you download them to your desktop on the web version. So and then when you share it, you get the option to type in the email addresses, comma separated as many as you want, or select them from your contacts. So if we do that, and it will just come up with some email addresses, you checkbox the ones you want to send it to, and then you just share, and then they'll get an email with a link to download the file. That's how it works. Like I say, usual stuff, light mode, dark mode, all the settings. It's pretty straightforward. Dealing with the raw audio data and turn it into MP3 files, that's really where the challenge is. So let's go and take a look how things put together, see how it works. I will be flipping between the mobile and the desktop, depending on the different functionalities. Probably mostly the desktop, but all the actions and everything all the same. But where is something different, I will definitely go in and I'll point it out. So that being said, let's go and have a look. Okay, so ultimately the thing that drives all this is the OpenAI API, and this is the text-to-speech model. I am using this format for my API call. So we've got your AI token, you've got your URL, your content type, and then you've got your body of your request, The model we're using is TTS1 for this one. You can use TTS1HD, which is a slightly higher quality output, therefore probably more expensive. And then we need the input text we're going to put in and which voice we're going to use. Like I say, I've used these names specifically. If you were building an app that you wanted to release into the world, obviously you would change the names, but ultimately these are the ones you'd be using if you're using this format. So that's basically the call we are making. And within Flutterflow, I'm actually using the built-in Flutterflow API call. It's a type post. We've got the URL, and then we've got the content type and our token. And then in our body, we have got the variables, which are the input, which is what we're asking it to convert, and then which voice we're choosing. Now, what you do get back in the output is essentially raw text. It is the raw text format of an audio file, which you need to decode and turn into an MP3. Basically, you don't get an MP3 file back, you get the raw text response that needs decoding and turning into an MP3. So that is done via the custom actions. Okay, so we'll start off with the main element, which is actually making the API call and returning the audio, which we turn into an MP3 file. Obviously, the rest of it all is built around that anyway, so we'll start there. So if we go to the button and our actions, we have basically got a load of page states. So the loading and controls page states, essentially that determines what's being displayed here. So the images for downloading our files, the main image, which is obviously when nothing's happening, and then also the Lottie animation, which is what you get when something is happening. When you're making an API call, they are all conditionally visible. So essentially the Lottie animation, if loading is true, so if you're loading something it shows it true. The main image essentially is if we're neither loading nor showing controls, the controls being the two download buttons. So we've got false, so we've got a double false, we're just showing just the image which is waiting to do something. Loading is true, we're showing our Lottie animation, which is like a sort of a circle spinning round. And then for our downloads, we have got if loading's false, so what we're doing, we're turning our, return our response from the API, returning loading back to false, so therefore the Lottie animation will disappear and the controls true, so therefore we're showing the controls. So we've got false, just show the Speakio logo. Loading true, we just show the Lottie animation to show something's happening, and then as you can see on the screen, controls true, loading false. Loading's finished, we need to do something with the information we received, therefore do you want to download it or put it in the cloud? That's essentially what we're doing with those elements there. So if we head back into the button, that's what they are. Then we're setting our AI prompt to a page state and also which voice we're using, which is via the choice chips. And the page state obviously is the text field for the prompt. Now remaining credits equals 0. So like I said about the store, I haven't set it up yet because whether this is mobile or a desktop app or whatever you're going to do, or web app, or you can do it as a PWA, there's going to be a few different ways people can set this up to monetize it if it's something you can do just as a wrapper. But obviously they differ, so therefore I haven't set that up yet because there are different ways of doing it. Because if you go into an app store, it will have to be done a different way to what as if you're doing it on a web app, obviously, because of the rules. So what we've got on page load, we're just checking how many credits a user has got. I'll come on to that in a second. And then essentially, so if you've got no credits left, basically you get an error saying you've got no credits, and then we're resetting some page states and we're clearing the text fields. But if you have got credits, and then we are basically making our API call, and our voice is basically our voice name, which is the page state we're setting above, and our input, which is our AI prompt again that we're setting above in here. And then when that's done, we're clearing the text fields, pin codes, and reducing our credits by 1, so our user loses a credit for make an API call. Obviously, you can make that 1, you can make it 10, you can do whatever you want. And then we are updating our users row in the Supabase users table with the remaining credits, which is what we've got here. And then you can see there we are setting controls to true and turning the loading value back to false, so therefore the lottie animation will disappear and the controls will appear. And then we're doing this refresh page thing, just to force a refresh on the page if it hasn't done so already. So that is the logic that essentially makes it work. And our voice response is what we are receiving from the API call. Basically, that is the variable we are receiving. So the API call itself we have seen. We're doing that via Flutterflow. And then therefore, right, if I switch this image off again. So when you've done your, which you've already seen, when you've done your API call and you've got a response, you get these two options. So if you want to download it to your computer, so we've got an action, you can see there on the icon, and that is calling a custom action, which is save text-to-speech audio. And then we are turning controls back to false. So once we've saved it, turning controls back to false, which will then show, we'll have double false, so therefore we'll re-show the Speakio image, which again you saw in the demonstration at the beginning. So the custom action, our input to the custom action is essentially our voice response body text. If you remember, I said the response come back as encoded audio. It's not a file, it's encoded audio you have to turn into a file. So the body text, and it comes back as a block of text in the body, basically. So from the API call, the body text that we're getting back from voice response, which is our action output from our API call, voice response, and essentially it's one of the options in the list, which want raw body text, because then that is what we're passing into our raw response parameter into our custom action. Okay, so saving our MP3 that we've generated to the download. Essentially we're taking the raw response, which is the binary response from the API call. We are creating a blob called audio data and giving it an explicit type, which is audio MPEG. So if we go down here, audio MPEG is the MP3 audio type that we're giving it. And then we're creating the URL and the timestamp, so we can essentially download the file by giving it the file name, include the timestamp and the MP3, which is obviously the blob we've created, the type. So we're downloading that to our device and then essentially just tidying up by removing the URL. That's how we're doing that. That is the download version. So as I said, the other option is saving it to the cloud. In our case, that is a storage bucket in Supabase. So what happens is when you click the icon, we've got some actions. And we've got an app state, which we are clearing. So the app state is the file name for the download, and essentially we're just clearing the value. In reality, we're going to overwrite it anyway, so we don't really need to, I don't suppose, but I'll just put that in there. And then we have got an alert dialog, which is us to give it the name. So we're going to give the file a new name, and that is a custom component. So it's a very simple one. Basically, the component comes in the middle of the screen, give your audio a name and click the save icon. And while that does, that then adds that file name to the app state variable that we've just cleared. So we're creating the new file name. Then you click save, and obviously the dialog will disappear. So the actions on there, like I say, update the app state and then dismiss the dialog. So then that will then continue the action chain once the dialog's cleared. We'll continue the action chain. We are then using our custom action to actually store the file, and we're passing in our raw response, the body text, the same as we did for downloading it to our device. I'll come on to that code in a second. And then once we have completed that custom action, that returns us a URL, which we are calling in the cloud save variable. And then we are inserting into our user audio table in Supabase the information we need to then put that in the users gallery. So that is the user ID, obviously, which is our signed in user. We've got the URL, which is the cloud save variable that we've just retrieved from our custom action. Then we've got the name of the file that we're calling it, which is the file name app state, which we have given a value in our custom dialog. And then the voice name is a page state that obviously we're updated when we select whichever voice we are doing in the choice chips. So in the choice chips, every time we change the choice chips, we update the page state whichever voice we have created, and we're using that in the download. So that's how we save it to the cloud. They're the actions. So let's go to the custom code and just look at exactly how that is happening in the background. So to save it to Supabase, we are taking our binary response, and same thing before, taking our binary response and giving it a variable audio data, and then we are creating a few variables for the upload. So we've got the timestamp, which we're including in the file name, which we're using the same file name format, which is essentially just an MP3 file, and then we've got the path that we are uploading, and then essentially we're uploading the binary to Supabase storage. So we've got the file path and the audio data is what we're uploading, and then we're returning the URL of the stored file back to our user. So we can then store that in the users table against their user audio. So basically that is the two ways we are saving the audio data, either as a direct download or to Supabase storage. So all of the code snippets and everything else we looked at there for converting the raw audio data into the files for saving, downloading, etc. It's all included within the template, so you can go and grab that, like I say, if you want to. So let's now just finish this off. We'll look at the rest of these few bits. So on the main page here where we're creating our audio, we've got the choice chips at the bottom. As I said right at the beginning, these are the standard voices that OpenAI are using. Obviously you would want to change these names, but and what we're doing with that is essentially on choice chip selection, we've got some actions, and we're updating the page state with the value of the choice chip, so whichever voice we're using, and then we're also using that in the API call, as I've said, the voice name. And then what we're doing at this point, we're querying our database. We've got a Supabase table called sample audio, and in that it's got some URLs, sample audio, and we've got the name and the URL of the files where they're stored in Supabase. So basically what we're doing then is from that sample audio, we are picking one of those based on the voice name, and that's how we're filtering the row we want. And then we're updating our audio URL with the URL of the row fields. And again, because we're only querying one row, we've got index 0, basically the first index, and that's why we're getting the URL of the first item in the list of rows, because there's only one row. So that's what we're doing there. And what happens is then, as we click those, then what will happen is, as you saw at the beginning of the demonstration, the audio player, the voice name will change. So essentially what we're doing is assigning the value of the voice name to the variable voice name, and then when you play the audio file, it will play whatever URL is in the audio URL variable. So that's what we're doing there. Essentially, click the choice chips and you can just get a sample of the voice, so you can decide which one you're going to use. That's the point of that particular element there. So a couple more elements need to show, and then we can wrap this up. So the next thing is we have got the user's dashboard. So if you decide to store to the cloud rather than download straight to the device, what will happen is in your user's audio gallery, all your MP3 files will come here in this grid view, or if you're in the mobile version, they are in a list view, basically. So what we've got here is the same thing, same layout, etc. both ways. It's just that obviously list view is more useful for mobile. And what happens here on the page, we have got a backend call, which is essentially just a database, Superbase queries, standard one, and we are filtering that by our user ID. So that'll be user's audio table. So it'll be, I've only got one in there, just hasn't been testing it, but it'll be by user ID. We're filtering and getting that particular user's audio files, and that's what's populating the list view. And then in the list itself, it's user audio rows, which is what we are getting from the Superbase query, basically. So that's how we're populating the list view, and it's the same in the grid view as well on the desktop view. And then within the containers we've got here, we've got a few options there. These images, these are just placeholders I've put in there created by AI. And so you've got a different image for, Nova, which I think is this one, different image for Shimmer, Echo, etc., etc. And the images are visible via a bunch of if-then conditions. So essentially, if your voice is this, Shimmer, Echo, and then pull the image from that URL. So they're all stored in Superbase storage, and the the URLs are hard-coded in based on whichever voice is created the file in that particular container, basically. And then you've obviously got your name of your file, what you saved it as. So again, that is done via just get the row field and the file name. Likewise, that's the voice as well. Get the voice name from the row field, and that's how we're assigning the image. And then below the images, we've got our row with our options on how we're going to deal with the files. We've got delete, play, and share, and this is really the first big difference between the two different styles of app. Whereas obviously we have the share button on the mobile, whereas on the desktop version we have the download button. So let's go and take a look at the download version first and look at that custom action. So this is the custom action for downloading from our users gallery. This is very similar to downloading the audio directly from when we create it, except we are pulling the binary information back from the URL, which is the Superbase URL, and then we are once again creating a blob and giving it the audio MPEG type, which is the MP3. We are creating the file name with our timestamp and the MP3 file, and then we're just triggering the download the same as before. So that is the code there that we're using to download from the gallery. So it's very similar. It's just that we're pulling the data back from Superbase rather than from the OpenAI API response. Okay, so we come to the controls area on the gallery on the mobile version. We've got the delete icon. Obviously you tap that and you delete the file. So we've got some actions on there, and that is firstly to confirm if your user actually wants to delete the file, obviously to ask them to doubly check, and if they don't, then don't do anything. And if they do, basically we've got backend call, which is deleting a row in Superbase in user audio, and our matching rows are ID and ID. So the ID of the row we are showing in the list view in that particular container, as long as it matches the ID in the row in the table, which obviously it does, then it'll be deleted. Then we show the snack bar just to say your file's been removed from cloud storage. So that's pretty straightforward. That's the same on both versions. And then we've got the play again, same on both versions. Click the play button, and then that populates the audio file and the file name in the audio player. Then you just tap play on the player to listen to your audio. So the actions on there is literally updating page states. So we are updating the name of the file, and we're updating the URL of the file. and they are again rows from the list related to how the container has been populated. So that being, once again, our list view is called user audio mobile, and it's user audio rows that we're pulling into it to populate the list. And then we are then using those rows name and URL to populate that. And then once again, the values in for the path for the actual audio and the name of the audio file are via the page state variables, and they get updated obviously when you click your play button. And then the only difference really between this and the sort of the desktop web version is this button. So if you remember, we've just gone through the download. If we're downloading it from the cloud, and in this version what we actually do is share it. So we then send an email via a Mailjet email with the URL on for our users, friends, whoever we've shared it to colleagues, whatever, to download. So on that, we are having to use some custom actions. So let's open up the viewer. So all we're doing is actually showing the bottom sheet. If you remember from the demonstration, the bottom sheet comes up, and then we've got custom components within the bottom sheet, which is how we share the URL. And then the parameters we're passing to the share component, which is what we're doing, I'll come to component in a second, is the audio URL. So we're passing the URL, which is the page state variable, to a parameter which populates on our custom component. So our audio URL is an audio path. That is the parameter that we're passing in. And then we've got two options here. We have got simply type in some email addresses, comma separated, and then once you click the share button, we've got a custom action called share audio. We're passing in the audio path and the recipients for our email, and then we dismiss the dialog, and we just show the snack bar to say your audio file has been shared, and the audio link, the URL, will come as an email. Therefore, our storage in Supabase, the RLS for select, is actually true, so allow public to download if they know the URL, obviously. So that is different to the RLS we've got set up for update, delete, and insert. But for select, we have got it set up with public RLS for sharing the audio to our email recipients. So again, I will go and have a look at that just in one quick second. And then the custom action for sharing is share audio, and that is simply usual standard remote procedure call, and we are calling a function in Supabase. So that function is share audio. This is, if you've seen any of my videos, you'll have seen this many times. This doesn't really change very much, to be honest with you. This particular function is where we are calling an API from within Supabase and using the Postgres HTTP extension. Once again, videos on this, links will be down below. So our input to the function is our input variable, which is the URL, and our users, which was the comma separated list. And then we are splitting the user list by the commas to separate each individual email address out. And then we're pulling the API keys from the vault, and then we're making the API call. The only thing about Mailjet, you have to have base64 encoded API key. It has to go in there, and then we are building the body of the call. So we've got the email we're sending it from, the name, and then we are basically all of our email recipients are being built in there from our recipient array as recipient, basically. So that is the variable we have created by splitting our comma separated list via commas. So then that becomes the array that we are then dealing with here to add the recipients into our body, and then essentially you've just got go and download your file from here, and the input variable there is actually the URL of the file, which is in Superbase storage under audio files. That's what we're doing on that particular part of the sharing. So if we go back to Flutterflow, and then we've got one more thing, and that is select from contacts. So we've got some more actions here, and firstly we're requesting permissions. So obviously on a phone, to access contacts we need permission from our phone user, and we're doing that via Flutterflow's inbuilt permissions. So we've got contact switched on, speak here would like to access your contacts. So after we've requested permissions, we retrieve the user's contact emails. That is custom action, obviously. And what we're doing then is dismissing the bottom sheet, which is the sheet we're currently on, which is the share sheet, and then we open up the contact sheet. So to retrieve the emails, we have got the custom action, like I say, and what that does, that just go and selects all the email addresses from your contacts, displays them, you can checkbox which ones you want to send the emails to. There was a few, if you remember from the demonstration earlier, in this phone I used for testing, I've got a few contacts and there's some in there, and that's what we were doing. So the request contacts, essentially we are creating a blank list which is email addresses, and then we're retrieving all the contacts email addresses and returning them in the email addresses variable. That's what was displaying on our custom widget, and we have got an additional package from pub.dev which is contact service, so we're having to add that as a dependency and import it into the function. So then once we have done that, we are displaying the contacts component, which again comes up in a bottom sheet, and then we've got a list of user emails, and like I said, you tick the ones you want to send the emails to and just tap share. And then on share we got some actions. If you remember, we've got a list of strings that we have just taken from our contacts list and sent it into this component, but our function in Superbase accepts a comma separated text list. So what we're doing, we're converting basically our list of strings to a comma separated text list. That's why I've done it. As always, there are probably many ways of doing this. It's not necessarily the most efficient way, but as I was working through, this is what I did. I may come back and change it at some point and update the template, but it certainly works as is, and I don't think it slows it down, but it's maybe not the most efficient. And then we are sharing the audio again, and we're adding in the comma separated users, which is our output from this particular function. So we are taking the list of strings, converting to a comma separated text object, adding that along with the URL, and then doing the same thing. We dismiss the dialog and show the snack bar. So that's how we are sharing our audio to our users, or to our friends or our colleagues or whoever it may be, via email, and obviously with the download earlier. So there's a few more pages to look at, and the first one of those is the store, and this is just a layout. I've just put something in there, so there's just some information on the page. And this is if you maybe want to sell a credit model. I haven't done any maths on these where I've put discounts and prices. I'm going to be honest, I just sort of made up some numbers, so maybe that's something that obviously you'd need to look at yourselves. But the reason I didn't set up the functionality, because if this is a web app or a PWA or it's going to an app store, they are completely different monetization models. Obviously, if you're selling digital products in the app stores, you've got to use their systems and give them their 30% tax, and obviously on PWAs and web you don't need to do that. So this is not set up, it's really just a placeholder, some content on the page, and then in terms of the monetization and setting up the payment gateways, all that kind of thing, you're going to have to go and do that based upon your monetization model and what type of app you're building. So that really sits there. And then finally we've got a settings page, which is basically user email address, the option to change your email and change your password. Then we've got light mode and dark mode, obviously, which we demonstrated earlier. And then we've got log out. That's really the crux of it. It's reasonably simple. There's a little bit to it in terms of dealing with the API responses and actually turn them into files. But other than that, it's quite straightforward and very handy. You know, obviously AI stuff massively popular. I will put the link to go and have a look at the template down below. Hopefully that was of use, and you can, you know, use this kind of format to look at and get some inspiration to build your own versions. And let me know in the comments if that's the case, and I will speak to you in the next video.